There's a lot of hope that a COVID vaccine may come out by the end of this year. Currently, more than 145 are in development, with 21 vaccines in human trials. But is the mad dash to find something to slow down this virus creating an unethical vaccine? Here to talk more about that is John Brehany, an ethicist with the National Catholic Bioethics Center. And John, given the rush by scientists, what ethical issues can arise in finding a vaccine for COVID-19?
Well, I think the one that is most concern for us Catholics, and should be a concern for anyone who values human dignity, is the fact that some pharmaceutical companies are using cell lines derived from elective abortions to produce these vaccines. That's, I would say, one of the most important ethical issues to address.
Why do those pharmaceutical companies use the cell lines taken from elective abortions to produce these
Yeah,
vaccines?
this goes back to the early 1960s in the United States. It's when they first began to do it, and they've continued to develop some new cell lines over the decades. But vaccines always have a weakened or a dead or a part of a virus, in them, and you have to give that to people. But that weakened thing has to grow and live in something, and that something is cells. Now, you can use animal cells. A company recently is using caterpillar cells, but going back to the 1960s, some scientists said, let's use human cells and find human cells that aren't contaminated. And that's why they said, well, let's get tissue from elective abortions and get cells from that. So that's the source. It's been around for a while. And the issue's coming back now as they're going to develop new vaccines.
So are Catholics permitted to use vaccines manufactured with cell lines taken from elective abortions? What if they come out with one for COVID?
That's a good question. This has been an issue for a lot of vaccines, or several, I should say, given in childhood: measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, other things. What the Vatican has said in a document called Dignitas Personae, the dignity of the human person, that came out in 2008, is that people may use these vaccines, but should use alternatives if possible. And they should work and witness to pharmaceutical companies to get them to develop alternatives. So the short answer is, if there's a great need, if there are no alternatives, it's permissible, but ideally people would always use alternatives, and we need to end this practice.
All right, so what can Catholics do to encourage the development of ethical vaccines?
Great question. I think they should write to their congressional representatives in the federal government, to their senators, and write to the Department of Health and Human Services and encourage them to support alternatives. This has been done in the past. The government does listen. We know some pharmaceutical companies have listened. There are alternatives. That's the good news. There are safe and effective alternatives. Companies use these sometimes because they've invested in them or they've used them for years. But there are alternatives, and people should, engage in this public advocacy to get them used.
All right, good advice. John Brehany from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Great to be on.
If you're watching Currents News on YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button and then click on the bell to get instant updates about all of our newest content, because we are putting your faith in the news.